Welcome back to my channel where I tell you what I would do differently if I was the creator of TV shows and movies. And today we are rewriting Maze Runner. So, the movie begins with Thomas waking up in a lift and he looks around as it's speeding toward the top and he's freaking out. But then it stops and several boys look over him as it's opened. But then Gally pulls him out, and all that will be the same. He will run away from them before falling on his face. Then he takes in his surroundings as he sees the walls around him and the opening of the maze, which of course he doesn't know is a maze yet. And then Thomas gets thrown in the pit, and then we get introduced to Albert, the leader of the Glade. And he releases Thomas and asks if he remembers anything before getting there. Thomas doesn't even remember his name. Albert tells him that that's normal. He'll get his name back in a few days, and that's the one thing they let them keep. And then Thomas asks what this place is, and Albert says he'll show him. And then Albert shows him around, and then we meet Newt, Albert's second in command, if you want from that. He's pretty much second in charge. And pretty much that whole scene will be the same. We learn the rules of the Glade, and then we meet Chuck. And that whole scene with Thomas walking to the entrance of the maze, and Chuck letting it slip that it is called a maze, will be the same. Thomas walks closer before being tackled by Gally, and everyone runs over as Thomas is freaking out. And then the maze closes, and Thomas is stunned about what he's seeing, and everyone leaves. Gally said next time he'll let him leave, and then Thomas is left there just staring at the closing door. And then we cut the night as everyone is partying. And a lot of it will be the same, but we will meet a few gladers just so we can have, we know more people than just the main core characters. And then we will, then Thomas will see Newt. Newt will walk over to him, hand them a drink, and they will sit down as Thomas and him talk. And we learn about his first day in the Glades. And this will be shown in a flashback. And we'll still learn about runners in more detail. We'll learn about Minho, that is the leader or the head of the runners. And we'll also learn that the maze changes, and that's why they haven't been able to map out the whole maze yet. And then we learn about the Grievers. And then we have that scene with Gally as we see them fighting, whatever. And then Thomas will get knocked to the floor, and he'll remember his name. And, he's like, hey, I remember my name. My name's Thomas. And then they hear a shriek from the maze. And then we see everyone go to bed. And the next day, Albert has Thomas write his name on the wall. And we find out why some of the names is crossed out. Because they have died. We see Newt and Thomas talking. Thomas throws out all these suggestions on how to get out, but Newt keeps on saying that they already tried them. And then Newt tells him to get more fertilizer. And then we run into Ben, a fellow runner, and he will attack Thomas and accuse him of that's all his fault before chasing them back to the others. And then we will learn that he'd been stung by a griever. And then he gets banished to the maze. And then later on that day, the next day, Albert and Minho will go try to find them. And then we cut to a little bit later where we hear a scream in the maze right before the doors open. And then we see them arriving back, but Minho is dragging Albert to the entrance. But they don't make it, so Thomas quickly jumps through and ends up leaving them all trapped. And then we see as it gets darker and the growling of the grievers gets louder. Minho and Thomas discuss what to do. They wander around the maze trying to find a place to hide. When Thomas notices vines and they use them to lift Albert out of sight. And then Minho notices a griever coming close and he panics, run away. Thomas struggled to keep Albert up, but he's able to hide under some vines. He, like on the other side stuff. He sees the griever walk past, and Thomas quickly ties the vine to keep Albert from falling before he hides as the griever returns. Thomas quickly walks away before realizing that the griever is above him. And then the griever soon gives chase. Thomas would end up at a dead end, barely avoiding a griever attack by climbing the vines. But the grievers start to try to climb the wall. Thomas continues to run, and I'm adding to where he finds a second griever and it starts to chase him. And then the same thing with Thomas jumping to another wall as both grievers give chase before the vines come crashing down. And both of the grievers, of course in my version, get stuck as they tried to fight to get out. Minho finds Thomas and they continue to run, finding a wall that's just starting to close, but Thomas stays behind as the two grievers start to chase them out. Right before it's too late, Thomas runs, barely making it to the other side, with the griever being crushed. The next day, we see Minho and Thomas carrying Albert to the entrance as Minho reveals that Thomas killed a griever. And then we see them tie up Albert so he can't attack them, like Ben did before Gally called them all for a meeting. And then they discuss what should be done with Thomas because he broke the rules. Minho wants to recruit Thomas, but Gally says he needs to be punished for breaking the rules. But before they can discuss this further, they hear movement outside and the box opens. And this is off schedule. And inside we see a young woman, and in her hand is a note that says, "The last one." And then she wakes up gasping Thomas's name before passing out again. Newt, Thomas, and Minho will pick her up and bring her to the infirmary. Newt asked if Thomas knows her, and he says no. The others get worried about what the note meant. Thomas tells Minho that he wants to go back out there, but Minho says it's not a good idea. Thomas tells them that they haven't captured or killed a griever before. So maybe they can use something to help them, like, figure out a way to escape or something. So, Minho will gather a team, and these will be like gladers that we have met, but not like the major ones. And then they find the griever and is able to pull off its leg. And then they are able to find the device. And then they go back and show the others. Thomas mentioned about them all, not whatever he said in the actual film. That's pretty much what he will say here. But Gally is against it and then insists that Thomas will be punished. Newt decides Thomas will spend the night in the pit, but he then promotes Thomas officially as a runner. And then Minho takes Thomas to the runner cabin where he shows them the map of the maze and how they already mapped it all out. And then we learned that Albert decided not to tell anyone so it wouldn't cause panic and so they could keep hope up. But now, since they have the device, Minho thinks they have a shot at escaping. The maze is divided into 7 sections, and last night the 7th one was opened. And it's probably where the griever came from. And then we see that girl has woken up and has climbed the watchtower and is throwing rocks down at everyone. But Thomas runs over and is able to convince her to stop. Thomas then climbs up and finds her holding a knife pointed at him. Thomas is able to calm her down, and she reveals her name is Teresa. And then Thomas tells her about the note. She tells him about these memories she has. Thomas reveals he's been getting similar dreams about what she described and remember seeing her. And then she tells him that she found syringes in her pocket. And the rest of that scene will pretty much be the same. And then a scene that I am adding will be that Thomas will bring the syringes to Newt and suggest give them to Albert. And then we get that scene with Albert fighting back, but Teresa injects him with it, and then he passes out pretty much, and then that scene will be the same. And then the next day, Thomas and Minho will go into the maze. If I'm not describing something here, it most likely still haven't happened unless I'm changing something that, of course, yeah. But oh, right. But that whole scene, actually, never mind. The next day, Thomas, Minho, and Thomas goes to the runner cabin, and they plan their route. And then we see Thomas and Minho arriving at Section 7, but it's not supposed to be open for like another week. And then they look around and find Ben's bloody clothes, and the device from the Grievers start peeping. And Thomas and Minho arrived in an area that no one has seen before, not even Minho. And when they reach the end of the tunnel, the beeping stops and the number turns green before a passage opens up. Sorry. And then they step forward, a laser scans them, they will hear some movement, and then they will run away from the blades as it starts closing. They'll be barely able to escape before returning back to the group, and they reveal that they might have found a way to escape. Gally and Thomas starts arguing, but is interrupted by Teresa as she tells everyone that Albert is awake. Everyone goes to see him, and he revealed that he remembers everything and said that Thomas was always their favorite. And then that whole scene will play out the same. Then they hear yelling outside as everyone runs out to see that the doors of the maze aren't shutting and more are opening. And then a griever runs out. Thomas and a few other hides in the field, but a griever finds them and kills one of them. Thomas runs away with the others as Gally hides some of them in the box, but many of many of them will. Many of the gladers dies. Sorry. And then one will block their path, so Teresa throws a lantern, burning it, but it still chases them. Albert falls to the floor, and Thomas protects him by getting in between the griever and him. And then all of a sudden, the griever is hit by some spears, and we learn that Newt with some of the others are there. Thomas is able to get Albert into the whatever room, the same place in the actual film, council hall, that's it. everyone stays quiet as the Griever climbs on top. As it breaks in, Chuck gets grabbed, but Thomas and Minho grabs him, and Albert rips off his leg before another Griever grabs him, and he tells him to get the rest out before being pulled away. After everything, Gally punches Thomas and says it's all his fault, and then Thomas considered that he might be right, so he grabs the stinger that Albert ripped off and stabs himself. And then he remembers everything. He remembers a lab with all of them there. The gladers in water tanks. He sees Teresa, and as he wakes up, we see that him and Teresa are in the pit, and Newt explained Gally has taken over and banished, and anyone that agrees with Thomas would then reveal that he remembers that it's all a test and that they were all experimented on. And in my version, I would add flashes of the experiments. Newt would say that what matters is what they do now. And then it'll be the same. And then Thomas and Teresa is brought to the opening of the door. A few of them are still hesitant, but Gally says that they don't need to risk their lives to leave. And then he reveals that he's given them up as a sacrifice. They tie Teresa up, but when they try to tie up Thomas, he attacks them. And with the help of Minho, Newt, and Chuck, they get the upper hand. They tell the others that they can come with them, and some do, but Gally stays behind. And all he says is good luck. The rest of them run through the maze, and in my version, they immediately start getting a chase by Grievers, and it instantly kills one of them. Minho and Thomas saves another glader from being another victim. They continue the run until they get to section 7, and a few more gladers die. But then they see the walls start shifting into a mini maze. This is the maze's way of trying to prevent them from leaving, their test thing. But they quickly go through as the Griever is on their tail. And the characters will get separated during this part. And one Griever will chase one group, and another one will chase Thomas and Teresa, and a few more that's with them. So this scene I'm adding will kind of be similar to when Thomas spent the night in the maze, and he would run from the Griever, but this will be with more people, and it'll be slightly different than the actual film. But Thomas and Teresa will end up defending off a Griever, injuring its leg before running away. And then they make it to the end of the maze at section 7, and shortly after, Newt and Minho, along with other gladers, arrives. And then a few of them died, and we will learn that. But then they make it to the tunnel, and Teresa reveals that there's a code. But before they can figure out what it is, more Grievers attack. and a glider gets flipped off the side, and Teresa runs over, saving Chuck from an attack. Then she slices at it, but she accidentally causes Chuck to drop the device, and he runs for it, quickly grabbing it before it goes off the edge. But he sees a griever is climbing up. He quickly gets back onto his feet as everyone is able to push the griever over the edge. Chuck and Teresa runs to the exit, and she asks Thomas what the code is. And Minho will tell her, Thomas will ask Minho what the sequence is, and Minho would tell her the sequence before another griever drops on top of Minho, and a glider will stab it from behind, saving Minho, but the griever will bite the glider before dragging him off. And she puts the code in. Teresa puts the code in, and walls start crashing down. The gliders quickly get to the tunnel, and the grievers get crushed. They enter a surveillance room with dead scientists. They see they have been monitoring them by them, and then Thomas activates a video of Dr. Page. That will be the same. We will then see Dr. Page's body before they walk to another door that, opens, but everyone hesitates. And then they hear a sound behind them, and they turn around to see Gally, who has been stung. He aims a gun at Thomas, and he is getting ready to shoot, but Chuck pushes Thomas out of the way, and Minho throws a spear at him, and he falls to the ground. Chuck falls, but not before he gives Thomas the toy that was from his parents, that, of course, that scene from earlier will stay in. He thanks him for giving him a chance before dying. And then armed individuals run inside and drag them away. And then the rest of the movie, it's pretty much over, but, it's pretty much the same. They get dragged onto the helicopters. All that will be the same. Now, let me know what you guys want me to rewrite in the future, and hope you guys enjoyed. I know this was a longer video, but I did add a whole nother sequence, and I described most of the film. But I'll see you all in the next one.